Hi, everyone, and welcome back to the Social Work Bubble podcast. I'm your host, Laura. I'm a licensed master social worker here in New York, and today we welcome a special guest, Naziat Hassan, who is a licensed mental health counselor, licensed professional counselor, also coming from New York, talking all about how we can support mental health awareness, reduce stigma as social workers. So thank you so much, Naziat, for coming on today.
Thank you, Laura, for having me on.
I'm really excited. Now, for the listeners, before we get started, don't forget to like, share, and follow the podcast on whatever platform you're listening on, and we will jump right in. So thank you again, Naziat, for coming on today. As we get started, can you introduce yourself to the listeners, including your background and what you're currently doing?
Yeah. First of all, again, thank you so much for having me on this podcast. I am a licensed mental health counselor in New York and a licensed professional counselor in New Jersey. I currently work at Queensborough Community College at Counseling Center as a mental health counselor. And I'm also the founder of my page, Pearls of Wellbeing, which aims to raise awareness around mental health, dismantle stigmas and negative beliefs around mental health, especially in the Bengali and South Asian community. I am Bengali and I identify as South Asian. So this is something that's very close to my heart because unfortunately there are still negative beliefs around mental health in the Bengali and South Asian community. So that's why I decided to create this platform.
Wow, that's wonderful. Absolutely. What things do you notice in particular? Like what kind of stigma is there in the Bengali community?
So there's mental health. I've found that a lot of people will refrain from talking about mental health, or, there will be a lot of gaslighting around mental health where it's more of, just pray, along the lines of, well, just pray and everything will be all right. Just focus on the positive things and just be happy. Right. So those are some statements that are made when people want to talk about mental health, and the mental health issues are often unaddressed, because people are so keen on kind of shoving it under the rug. So, there isn't a lot of room. There aren't a lot of safe spaces or, safe communities where people can address mental health issues. Unfortunately, even in the younger generation, there's still a lot of stigma around mental health where it's just like looked at very negatively and, it's looked as something that, we don't talk about. We don't talk about mental health issues. Nothing is wrong. Everything is fine. Kind of covering it up so that, people can move on with their lives pretty much.
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, I realize I'm starting off with all these questions I did not prep you for ahead of time, but I'm wondering, with that stigma, what led you into the field in the first place?
Yeah, and these are great questions, and this is why we're having this conversation, because unfortunately in a lot of communities, it's still, even the field is looked at skeptic, there's a lot of skepticism around mental health and mental health counselors and, psychology, psychiatry, all of that. I've heard a lot of statements where people are like, if you go into this field, you will come out, being affected negatively as well. Your mental health will deteriorate as a result of going into the field, is a statement that I've heard in my own experience. It's, I came into this field because there weren't a lot of, when I was younger, my mom actually knew about therapy. Whereas I didn't know, and I was surprised that, at that time, and this was like 18 years ago,
right,
where mental health was still, a bit new. People were still, there were practitioners, there were services available, but people didn't know about it as much. So I was surprised that my own mother knew about therapy. And I'll be honest, she put me in therapy because she felt that, I needed it. I could benefit from it. I was going through some adjustments in school at that time. And so I went into therapy, but, I looked at the therapist and I realized that the therapist doesn't look like me. And I would benefit from working with someone who looked like me, who understood my cultural background, my cultural preferences. And I realized, I was studying psychology, and I realized that there are a lot of social workers who are Bengali, but there aren't a lot of psychotherapists or mental health counselors who are Bengali. And this is something that's relatively new. And I thought, you know what? I want to get into this field because there aren't a lot of people who look like me, who understand the culture or the stigmas in the culture around mental health. And so here I am today. I will, not to brag or, anything. I am one of the few Bengali psychotherapists in New York. There are other mental health counselors as well. But we are just, there are a few of us who are actual mental health counselors.
Right. And that's saying something given it's New York, where, there's so many people, and the fact that you're still only one of a few, when that representation is so important. Like, as much as I think like therapists and everything can be helpful cross-culturally, it's different when you understand the nuance and you also come from that space.
Right. Absolutely.
Oh, wow. Now, when you first think about mental health awareness, what does that look like? What comes to mind for you?
Yeah, when I think about mental health awareness, I think about the ability to freely speak about issues currently facing our society as a whole, the ability to confront challenges we may face on a daily basis, safe spaces, healing spaces where people can voice their concerns, voice the issues that they're experiencing on a daily basis. When I think about mental health awareness, I think about, not just on a local level, but also on a national level. That there are organizations right now, especially, who are working towards raising awareness, giving people information about the different, because mental health is so vast, right? So there are aspects to it. There are different pieces to it. And, there are organizations and, work and communities who are doing the work to, spread this information, spread the different aspects of mental health throughout the country and different communities. The youth, I think about the youth, especially now, who are more self-aware, who are, raising awareness and speaking out against, on the issues that they're facing. So that's what I think about when I think about mental health awareness.
All very important things too, because it's at like every level, not just addressing stigma and things one-on-one, but reaching that broader level of society.
Right.
Wonderful. What have been some really helpful ways that you've seen mental health awareness done and kind of dealt with?
Yeah. I think especially now, some helpful ways is one, word of mouth. I think parents play a huge part in their children's lives when it comes to the well-being, overall well-being, holistic well-being. So when parents kind of recognize that, hey, my child is undergoing something is off, or there's just something not okay. I think my child is not okay. And then speaking up about that, seeking resources, seeking the help. I think schools are doing a wonderful job in having, not only school psychologists, but, mental health programs. Within the schools, having social workers, having, school counselors, school psychologists, having an anti-bullying program. So those are some ways that I've seen, those are some helpful ways that I've seen mental health awareness done. Social media, especially, is a huge role, especially now when it comes to mental health awareness. Now, of course, I'm not saying that people should completely rely on social media to, navigating through their issues or confronting those issues. There are resources. There is help outside of social media that people should seek out.
Right.
There are resources outside of social media that people seek out, but social media is a first. I think it's at the forefront of mental health awareness, especially now.
Absolutely.
I also believe that various organizations, like I said before, various organizations, like Mental Health America, where they have toolkits for mental health. They have toolkits for each month. They have a toolkit for BIPOC mental health awareness. They have a toolkit for suicide prevention, trigger warning.
Right.
So different organizations, schools, the communities, clubs, working together to host events where people talk about, how to communicate with your child, or how to look for signs for depression, or how to look for signs for anxiety, are helpful ways that I've personally seen mental health awareness done.
Absolutely. So much of it is just, again, like educating the public, making sure people have solid information, which is why, I think social media is so much at the forefront, because it's so accessible to people. On the flip side, as much as I've loved what social media has done for mental health awareness, I think it has also created a space where people that maybe don't know what they're talking about are then giving misinformation about mental health.
No. I was, no, go ahead. I'll let you finish.
Oh, no, I was just going to say, I think that's part of educating people as well, is helping them understand where to get information that is reliable and coming from resources that we can trust.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd like to say that social media, it could be a guide, and other resources would be the actual go-to for people.
Right.
Like I mentioned before, social media is not where people can get therapy.
Right.
Social media is not a school or an educational institution where people can access information. It's a guide. It's accessible to people, so people have it, but it shouldn't be something that people solely rely on.
Absolutely.
So I agree with you. Yeah.
Yeah. Kind of like it can plant a seed of like, oh, okay, this is something, maybe I need to see a therapist. Maybe I need to check this out more, but by no means should be the end all be all of someone's.
Right. Absolutely.
Wonderful. Now, have you noticed a shift in mental health awareness in recent years? And if so, what has that looked like? What have you seen?
Yeah, I think definitely. There's definitely been a shift in mental health awareness in recent years. I just think about, 10 years ago when I first visited a doctor's office, and when the doctor asked me, oh, what do you do? What are you studying? And I said, I'm studying mental health counseling. And the doctor looked at me like, asked me, what is that? What is that about? Is that like social service? And at that time, I did not have the right words.
Right.
I didn't have the right vocabulary per se to explain, like, no, it's not. It's so different from social service. Mental health awareness is, at that time, I couldn't say that mental health awareness is really taking care of your whole well-being. It's about taking care of your mental state, your psychology. Yeah. So I couldn't really explain it then, but I think over the years, it's definitely shifted. Literacy around mental health has increased exponentially. Public figures, celebrities are coming out to talk about their mental health issues. I was surprised when I heard that Michelle Obama came out, talking about her, mild depression. Simone Biles, Taraji P. Henson, Jay-Z, all these, just to name a few celebrities. Selena Gomez is doing great work, advocating for mental health. So there's just been a lot of education, in recent years. There's been a lot of studies, research that's being done around mental health. There's research being done on, underrepresented communities. When it comes to mental health. The other day a couple of weeks ago, I was looking at an article by an organization called SUPNA NYC, who work with low-income South Asian women. And they did a study on the mental health in Bangladeshi women.
Mm-hmm.
And they found that half of what they're undergoing is because of external factors. Half of the mental health issues are stemming from external factors such as, domestic violence,
Mm-hmm.
Low access to financial resources, familial factors, family issues, dealing with in-laws and whatnot. So I thought it was profound that there's actually a study out there for, being Bengali and being from a Bangladeshi background.
Mm-hmm.
It touched my heart because, mental health and the Bangladeshi community you don't really see that, see the combination as often. So
Absolutely.
I'm just happy to see that there's just a lot of literacy and research articles around mental health, increasing exponentially.
Yeah. I mean, that takes it to another level too. I think for the social workers listening, like it goes beyond having conversations, but like if you're in a research position, making sure you're being really mindful of not just, researching white cis men again, but making sure you're expanding the pool of, okay, who needs support? What communities can we look at in terms of research and mental health treatment and like the different nuance of working with different communities? It's so important.
Right. Absolutely.
Wonderful. Now, in terms of mental health stigma, what have you seen are the biggest contributors to that stigma? What really perpetuates it?
Yeah, that's a huge one, right? Because it's so multifaceted.
Mm-hmm.
There are so many avenues to mental health stigma. But personally, on a personal level, what I've recognized is it's from families, it's societal, it's cultural, and it's religious. And I'll talk a little bit about religion because, again, I'm talking from a Bangladeshi Muslim perspective.
Sure.
What I've seen is, just, again, like I mentioned before, like, let's just put everything under the rug and not talk about it.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Let's just not even think about, let's not even go there. Let's not even talk about mental health. We don't talk about these things. What do you mean you're depressed? What is depression? Do you need to go to a psych ward? Do you need to see what do you call those? I forget the word. Do you need to see like a psychiatrist or something? Okay. Or do you need to see a psychologist or a shaman or a religious leader? So, these are things that contribute to mental health stigma. I think there's just a lot of in the Islamic religion, there are superstitious beliefs where people are being possessed. And I think in a lot of other cultures and religious backgrounds too, there's this belief that people are possessed if they're undergoing mental health, if there's a mental illness, you're possessed by these demons, you're possessed by, these entities, which is not, it's not backed by science, it's not backed by, research, and evidence. So there's that. And then there is, cultural factors, where people are just like, I went through this, I went through something like this. Why can't you just, toughen up and, deal with it? And then, in society for many years, we've seen how mental illness is, institutionalized, criminalized.
Yeah.
If we look at history, right? How people with mental illness, where's the first place that they went to? They went to the psych wards or they were jailed. So there are a lot of, I think this is a question I think that, the answer is not just one answer, it's multifaceted. And we can go on and on about what contributes to mental health stigma, but these are some things that I've seen, happen when it comes to, um, when we talk about contributors to mental health stigma.
Yeah, because all those things too, I've seen like across the board for so many people, just internalizing that, even like what you were saying about religion or feeling it was like possession or something, where there's so much personal blame or like, oh, well, you're not doing enough or you didn't pray enough or you didn't do this and this and this. And so it's your fault, when again, like we don't have that perspective with physical health conditions for the most part. And
absolutely.
And so much of that, like people have internalized it where they think, oh, there's something wrong with me. Like, oh, I didn't do enough or I should have done this, when sometimes our brains just do their thing.
Right. Right.
Are there areas in particular where, like in mental health, where you're still seeing a lot of stigma? Because I've seen, at least in the recent years, there's been a huge shift, like we talked about, where there certainly is more awareness. There's more conversation that's happening, which is really exciting. I've seen that happen a lot with like depression and anxiety being talked about. I feel like there's been a huge shift with that. But with like some other mental health conditions, there's still so much stigma, like with personality disorders or schizophrenia. Yes. Do you notice anything else where there's still so much stigma attached to it?
Yeah, well, definitely personality disorders, especially borderline personality disorder. I've seen a lot of stigma where even, unfortunately, even some clinicians or even some clinicians will be like, well, that's a tough one. How do we treat borderline personality disorder or any other personality disorder, right?
Yeah.
I've seen, I'm sorry. I've seen, stigma around, unfortunately, there's still stigma around autism and the autism spectrum, where people are just like, it's oftentimes they don't know what to do or say.
Right.
Or, there's just a lot of negative connotation around these conditions.
Absolutely.
So definitely personality disorder, definitely, autism, schizophrenia. I think there's still a lot of stigma around even depression and anxiety. Still to this day.
Certainly.
I feel like people are not ready to talk about these conditions. They're not ready to confront them. Unfortunately, there's still a lot of people who exhibit the symptoms, but they're just not ready to face them or, treat them. So those are some areas that I've seen a lot of stigma, and I'm sure there's more, but I just can't think of any more on the top of my head. But definitely borderline personality disorder, I've seen a lot of stigma around, because it's just like, people will often say like, I don't know what I'm getting, or this person is borderline. There are phrases that are made up as a result of the stigma, where people are just like, I don't know what I'm getting, or this person is so volatile or fragile. I don't know what to do. So a lot of these stigmas are also stemmed in not knowing or not having enough education about the conditions. So that's where these stigmas are stemming from.
Yeah, that's a very good point, because you see that a lot in like professionals and clinicians too, that are supposed to have the training and the education, but there's a disconnect. Even like with something like autism, so many people that have autism are diagnosed with antisocial personality disorder.
Yes.
Or it's totally missed. And the same thing with ADHD. And even with, like you were saying, depression and anxiety, although there has been a shift, I think it's really, like, people are still only talking about symptoms and things that can feel a little bit more socially acceptable. Like they're not really talking about the really like dark side of depression, and like not brushing your teeth, and like things that can almost be viewed as gross. Like on social media, I see people saying like, oh, clean my depression room with me, which is great that that's being showed, that people struggle with keeping those things up when they're experiencing depression. But it's also like, okay, it's a messy room. Like it's not really showing like the nitty gritty of what something can look like.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah.
With professionals in particular, because when there's like a lack of education or understanding, or even just professionals having their own internalized stigma, which does happen so often, what do you think they can do to work through that and to just kind of release some of that stigma that they've internalized?
I think definitely, increase self-awareness and normalize having these conversations. I think we need to normalize having these conversations and, talking about these, even the difficult ones, right? Even the conditions that we just spoke about. Normalize seeking treatment, increase self-awareness, seek supervision, right? Seek supervision, seek guidance is what I'll say. When you see that, there's internalized stigma. Oftentimes I feel that clinicians may not be aware of it, but I think, as clinicians, as social workers, we need to find time to really reflect and ask ourselves, is this something, where are my beliefs coming from? Where is my stance coming from? Is it internalized stigma that I'm projecting? So take some time to really reflect and understand where all this is coming from. Seek guidance, seek supervision, and also don't beat yourself up for it. Really work through it, right? There are so many avenues to increasing self-awareness, right? Try to understand another person's perspective. Try to understand different cultures. Something that I like to, that I used to ask my clients all the time is, this is who I am. This is what I look like. This is my background. I'm Bangladeshi and I'm Muslim. How do you feel about working with me? And, a lot of times the response was, thank you for sharing that. I had a couple of questions, that I want to ask you. And I'm like, sure, I'm open to questions. Yeah. So, using that approach and then doing the same for, taking time to understand the other person's culture, the other person's background, the experiences is vital.
Absolutely.
So that's the approach that I would use when working through internalized stigma, is to try to understand the other person's perspective, gain some self-awareness, and seek guidance and supervision.
Yeah, that's huge. That's huge. I've seen too, I think as professionals, we forget that we're just inherently in this power dynamic with our clients, where it can be so easy to walk into the room and feel like we know it all and we have the answers and we know what's going on. And it's a moment just to humble yourself and listen to what your client is saying, and to listen to the experiences of people that are actually dealing with these different conditions that we're talking about, that are going through these different experiences. Because as much as we can, look at the DSM-5 and check off all those criteria, we never really know an experience unless we've had it ourselves or we take seriously what the people we're working with are saying.
Yeah, I'm glad that you mentioned the power dynamics, because that's something that I wanted to touch upon a little bit.
Yeah.
There's definitely a power dynamics, right, between the professional and the client. I think even the clients, they want to know, they want all the answers. So we as clinicians, we feel that we need to give all the answers as well, but we have to understand that we're not perfect as well. Right. And that we have, we're still learning, we're still growing I feel like with each client and with each experience, we're learning something from clients and we're taking something from the client. So, that's an avenue to, to go on as well.
Yeah, absolutely. It took me such a long time because of, my own perfectionism and things to get comfortable if a client asked me a question to be like, I don't know. I'm going to have to get back to you. I'm going to have to research a little bit. I'm going to have to refresh my memory, because I think there can just be this space where we feel like we have to know it all. We have to be perfect in many ways, or just be the absolute best all the time. And that's just not going to happen. We are human too. We need to give ourselves the space to grow and to continue to learn and educate ourselves as well.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Wonderful. Now, with social workers, with other mental health counselors and professionals, what role do we have in raising awareness and reducing stigma? What can that look like?
Yeah, we have a huge role, right? I think we're at the forefront of all of this, and we have a big role in raising awareness and reducing stigma. Like I said before, right? We need to start holding spaces for meaningful conversations, right? We need to start asking those big questions, right? We need to hold ourselves accountable for what we do. We need to hold others accountable for, their approach in working with clients, right?
Yeah.
We need to do more research. I wish, there was, when we were in grad school, I wish there was more opportunity. There were more opportunities to do research projects or, research activities where people really understand the science behind stigma and raising awareness. So, holding spaces for meaningful conversations, working with the communities, working with leaders, right? I think is something that we should be doing in raising awareness and reducing stigma, educating the public. I think it's our role. I think the first step as a counselor, when I first meet with clients, something that I do is I educate and I say, this is what counseling looks like. This is what, therapy is about. What are your thoughts? What are your concerns? So kind of just starting, asking those questions about, what people think, what comes to mind when you think about mental health, or what are some, reservations you have? What are some thoughts that you have about mental health would be great, if we can do that more often.
Yeah, absolutely. That's so important too, because it makes sure that it's very person-centered, where everyone's walking into the room with this idea of what therapy is, what is counseling, what is mental health. We've all been shaped by so many different things, exactly what you were saying earlier, like religion and culture and society and family. And there have been so many clients I've worked with where there's been a disconnect on what they expect from therapy and what therapy could look like, or the therapy I offer. And that's where it's so important to have that conversation up front. So that way there's also no issues moving forward. And so clients understand, oh, okay, this is what I can expect. This is what this looks like. Cause I think we think of therapy and we typically think of that psychoanalytic, laying on the couch, very Freudian, all of that. And I've had clients come in thinking oh yeah, this is what's going to happen. And although we could certainly do psychoanalysis, let's talk about a little bit more than that.
Right.
It's an important piece. Wonderful. Now, you also mentioned too, holding other people accountable, which I think is huge, because there have been times where I think especially if we're working in an agency or a group or something, where we can maybe call out other therapists, other professionals if we notice maybe their own stigma, their own transference, their own stuff. Is that something that you've ever had to do before, or had to have a conversation like that?
I'm glad that you asked this question, because I remember a couple of years ago, I was working for an agency, and a mental health counselor had made a comment and this was about working with a Muslim family. And at that time, I was just baffled by what she had said. Yeah. She had said something along the lines of, and I'm not going to say who this person is, but she had said something along the lines of, oh, if I do X, Y, and Z, I'll be killed. I'll be killed by this family.
Oh my God.
So I was just okay, I took a moment. I was just quiet. But you see, back then I didn't have the tools or the words or the vocabulary to really speak out and say, well, this doesn't sound okay coming from, a professional like yourself. If it were me now, I would probably say something. I would probably say, I'd probably ask, what do you mean by that?
Sure.
Or where's that coming from? So it's not just about, I don't think it's just about calling them out on it, but kind of getting into their mindset and asking I noticed that you had said something like this. What does this mean? Or where is this coming from? I know this is easier said than done,
Sure.
but politely asking, or, coming from a place of curiosity, coming from a place of genuine interest, and, asking those big questions like, can you elaborate on that? Or, I noticed that you had said something about this specific culture, this specific religion. What, this is a big statement. Can you elaborate more on that, what you meant by it? And actually explaining like why this may sound like a microaggression, or this may sound, biased, right? So, I think for us social workers, I think the biggest step is really to find out what's happening, why this is happening, and then educate individuals.
Absolutely.
About why it's not okay to say certain things. And then also to support and maybe do group supervision, hold group supervision. I think group supervision is so crucial. I wish there was more room for group supervision in agencies.
I love it.
Twice per week. So that people can really learn from each other and understand each other. I think we need to I think social workers and mental health counselors, they need to collaborate more often.
Oh, absolutely.
And, find out like, hey, this is what I'm seeing. What are you seeing? Right. So there's room for education. There's room for advocacy. There's room for growth.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. That's huge too, because you're right. There's a big difference between calling someone out and then having a productive, helpful conversation.
Yeah. Yeah.
Now, as we're kind of wrapping up, what's just one way the average social worker that's listening, how can they promote mental health awareness, and how can they continue to reduce stigma in the work that they do? What would you advise them?
What I would advise is that, take some time to learn about various conditions. Take some time to educate yourself about various conditions. Take some time to learn about different cultures. Start with your own cohort. Start with your own, your own network.
Yeah.
Start by asking those huge, big questions. Start by, looking into, understanding why there is stigma, why are there negative beliefs around mental health. Start by doing research. You don't have to be on a big project, or you don't have to publish anything. But I think as social workers and mental health counselors, it's our duty to educate ourselves about different conditions, what that looks like in different cultures, what that entails, and hold those spaces. Take time to listen to other people's concerns and hold those spaces for meaningful conversations, for opportunities. Look out for opportunities to raise mental health awareness. Maybe there are community events happening with your local council member or local leaders, and then you can use that space to really maybe talk about mental health, which is something that I'm trying to do with my platform. So yeah.
Yeah, that's so exciting. Well, wonderful. I think, Naziat, this has been so helpful, I think, to talk about mental health awareness and stigma, because it's one of those things that I think we just miss a lot of the time. We can get so sucked into the work that we forget these bigger things are really at play. For those listening, I know that you have your platform and everything. Where can listeners continue to follow your journey?
Yeah, so I have an Instagram page. It's called @Pearls of Wellbeing.
Yes.
So, you can follow me on Instagram. You can also email me. Laura, if I can send you my email address, and then you can spread the word. You can also email me with questions or concerns, or, if you want to collaborate, I'm available there as well.
Exciting. And for those listening, everything will be linked below, so you can easily reach out to Naziat with anything. And if anything resonated with you today, please feel free to like, comment, share, and we will see you next time. Thank you so much, Naziat.
Thank you, Laura, for having me.